everyone, welcome to this series, the After Office Hours series. My name is Njeri Murage and I am with Women in GIS Kenya. And we are really glad to have you here in this series where we train and we educate on various tools in the geospatial space. So just briefly before we get started, I'd like to talk about what the After Office Hours series is. And basically, it's a series where we started on training and skilling up the community using tools and technologies that are currently in the market for the purposes of geospatial analysis, data visualization, among others. And right now, we are currently conducting a four-part series on spatial analytics with R. And we are really glad to have you here, where we had the first series being by one of our really great RSAT ladies called Shelmith, and then we had the second and the third session being done by Michael Otieno himself from Kenya Red Cross, and finally now today we also have this third series by Michael again. And the last series was really informative. It was about exploratory of your data. So basically having an understanding of your data with various analytics and visualizations. Now, in this particular case, we'll be now going further into data modeling and analysis with R. So I'm not going to take much of your time. I'll let Michael introduce the R series, the part that he covered last week, last webinar, as well as what we are going to have this week, which is on data modeling and analysis with R. So Michael, I'm going to have you take it away. Michael is an amazing GIS analyst, information officer from Kenya Red Cross Society. I'll let him talk more about his journey and how he came to get to love R and to do the projects that they do with Kenya Red Cross. So Michael, take it away.
So first of all, I welcome you all in this third part of using R for data analytics. I would want to take this opportunity to thank Women in GIS for offering me this platform to showcase how the Kenya Red Cross Society, alongside the International Center of Humanitarian Affairs, is using R to inform, decision making for humanitarian response. So maybe something that out on the chat box, we have a series of R scripts. I've knitted some HTML scripts. So for those of you who would want to follow through today's tutorial, you are at liberty to just click on the link and download either the R Markdown script or the HTML R Markdown analysis script, so that at least you can go through. So for today's session, I want it to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to interrupt us in the middle of the session, so that at least we can have a good understanding. So without further ado, allow me to just delve into today's series. So the last time we had a session about a fortnight ago, I took you through how to basically visualize spatial data using R. And we were using a case study for COVID-19 data in Kenya. So for today, we are now going to proceed on and see how best we can model COVID-19 risk in Kenya. So I'll just start off with a little bit of introduction about myself for those who are not there in the last series. So my name is Michael Osunga. I work as the Geoinformation Officer at the International Center for Humanitarian Affairs. So I hold a master's degree in geoinformation and a bachelor's degree in environmental science from Kenyatta University. So I've been using R in my undertakings, both spatial and non-spatial. So just to introduce you a little bit about the International Center for Humanitarian Affairs. So this is the knowledge hub service hub for the Kenya Red Cross Society that strives to generate information, evidence-based information to basically improve humanitarian programming. So improving how we prepare for disasters, how we respond, how we mitigate, and how communities recover from disasters. So under the research and learning, I sit at the data unit alongside climate, health, and cash and voucher assistance. And our main work for data is one, we have 5 main work streams. So we have business intelligence. So we're trying as much as possible to use business intelligence tools to inform humanitarian programming, such as dashboards. Then we have research and data analytics, where we are trying to use predictive and classification algorithms to better understand data coming in from various Kenya Red Cross programs. Then we have the data literacy and support service, where we are trying now to build capacity to Kenya Red Cross volunteers and staff on using data, GIS, and so on. Then there is the big data use, where now we're trying to use Earth observation satellites, drone imageries, basically to monitor disasters. And lastly, data visualization and storytelling. How best can we design, can we co-design visualization products that are tailored to suit the needs of the community. So for more on ICHA, you can visit the link. So in the interest of time, I'll go to the next slide presentation. So some of the GIS snippets that we've been having is basically we've used satellite and Earth observation imageries, as you can see on the screen. So to monitor floods, drought, and most recently we use this for the impact assessment for the desert locust. So this is basically what we've done, and there is more. So my journey in R started way back in 2014 during my tenure at the Regional Center for Mapping. And since then, we've been using R quite a lot. And one notable thing is that we've derived the national land cover maps for Kenya, time series maps from Landsat. And the classification algorithm that we used for this product was R. So I want to encourage any GIS users who use ArcGIS, Saga, and whatnot to just try and use R. So for this particular webinar series, we shall be applying a very simple spatial epidemiological technique to basically try to understand what are some of the risk factors for COVID-19. As we are aware, as of today, I was just looking at the Ministry of Health press releases. The number of COVID-19 keeps soaring higher and higher. So there is that need for now using geoinformation to basically understand the geographical spread of COVID-19 across all the 47 counties in Kenya. So for this particular webinar series, we are going to use openly available data on COVID-19 risk, basically from Ministry of Health, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, and the Kenya Healthcare Federation. The prerequisites for this webinar is either you have RStudio installed in your computer. If not, you can follow through the needed HTML file that I've shared on the chat box. So let's now delve into the modeling of COVID-19 data. So we're going to use a very globally accepted open source tool called the Index for Risk Management. So INFORM, it has been developed by the European Commission and Joint Research Center. It's a very commonly used framework by humanitarian organizations that supports prioritization for preparedness and response actions for disasters. So within this context of humanitarian work, any disaster risk is defined as either hazard exposure, vulnerability, and lack of adaptive capacity. So basically, we are now going to look at how can we use R to somehow model data on hazard exposure, vulnerability, and lack of adaptive capacity in Kenya, and use some of the composite risk index from the INFORM framework in order for us now to see which counties are at the moment are at higher risk of COVID-19 as compared to the rest. So one thing to note about the INFORM index is it looks at the already existing risk factors for COVID-19. And it does not, and I underline, the INFORM COVID-19 risk index cannot predict the impacts of the pandemic. And neither does it model the mechanisms behind secondary impacts associated with COVID-19. So it basically allows you to come up with a COVID-19 risk score, so that at least humanitarian organizations can better prepare for or they can better respond to COVID-19. So just take note of that. So we'll be able now to see how how we've used R to basically manipulate and visualize some of these COVID-19 risk factors in Kenya based on one, exposure, vulnerability, and lack of adaptive capacity. So in these three buckets of COVID-19 risk, I'll start now giving a very quick explanation of what hazard and exposure entails. So hazard and exposure, according to the index for risk management, the INFORM framework, it basically looks at how many cumulative cases of COVID-19 do we have across all the 47 counties. And then again, it also looks at the county attack rate, like how many COVID-19 cases do we have amongst a population of 100,000 people. Then on vulnerability, we're going now to look at what are some of the demographic indicators that predispose these counties to COVID-19. For instance, we'll be looking at disabled people, number of street persons, and this data is highly obtained from the newly released 2019 Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. And then lastly, we are now going to look at lack of coping capacity. So in terms of health system capacity across all these 47 counties, how are they faring on? How many ventilators do they have? How many isolation beds do they have? And this data we are going to get, we have obtained it from the Kenya Health Federation. So we are modeling COVID-19 using openly available data from various sources. And yeah, so maybe allow me to now delve into my R script. So I don't know. Jerry, do we have any questions on the chat box? Any questions with regard to my presentation so far? Before now I delve into the deep dive in R.
Currently, we have no questions, but I'd encourage everyone, if you have any question, especially with regards to even the indexing, how they got to it, what exactly it means. Yeah, please, you can ask at any point, and then we will forward it to Michael. So yeah, Michael, you can continue.
Okay, for sure. So at this particular juncture, it is my hope that if not all of you, some of you have opened the R script that has been populated on your screen. If not, it is my hope that you have also populated the HTML R Markdown files so that at least you can follow through. You can follow through the code.
Sorry, Michael. I can interject as guys are downloading the materials and opening. And Duta Karanja is asking if you can explain on the COVID indexing further. Maybe do you have a Duta? You can unmute yourself if you have a particular specific question around that to ask. Otherwise, Michael can just explain the indexing.
Yeah, just on the indexing from epidemiology point of view. How you reach to indexing?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, we are using the Index for Risk Management framework. So the Inform COVID-19 Risk Index, and this index is has been derived by the European Commission Joint Research Center, and it is a globally accepted. It is open source. It is an open source index that is used by humanitarian organizations to basically look at what are some of the risk factors for disasters. For instance, drought, flood. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, so about a month or so ago, the Joint Research Center also sat down and said, well, how can we come up with the COVID-19 risk index just to see where countries are in terms of vulnerability, lack of adaptive capacity, and exposure. So at the moment, this index is used at a national scale, at country scale. So for us as Kenya Red Cross Society, we are now trying to attempting now to downscale it to up to ward level based on openly available data. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I can ask a follow-up. You say that with Kenya Red Cross, you want to try and scale it down to ward level. With this change in resolutions, which other factors would have to be in consideration so that the risk index is still an accurate read of the outcome? Like what would one have to consider?
So that's a good question. So we'll have to consider one, if availability of data. So do we have data on exposure, number of cumulative cases of COVID-19 in all the wards in Kenya? Okay, so it's all dependent on reliability of data. Two, how recent is that data? And thirdly, how frequently is that data updated? So if we look at these three components that I've mentioned before, then we'll now be able to see whether we can scale down the COVID-19 risk index up to ward level. So at the moment, we have made an attempt of now modeling COVID-19 risk index at county level, but we are hoping that soon we'll go up to ward level.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. I think you can proceed with the scripting. I hope everyone is now who would like to code along has now downloaded the material. If you want to follow, you can follow with the R&D file that is in the drive. If you just want to see the final outputs, you can check the HTML file. Okay, Michael.
Thanks, Jerry, for that. So for more learning material on the Inform, I've shared a link. And then also there's a link where you can visualize COVID-19 risk classification in all the countries worldwide. And then at the Kenya Red Cross, like I'd mentioned before, we've made an attempt now to visualize some of these COVID-19 risk factors at county level. So we've developed an R-Shiny application, and that's the link where now you could comparatively, compare vulnerability, lack of adaptive capacity, and so on and so forth. So I will now delve into the deep dive of how to model COVID-19. So the first thing before any R project is to basically set up your workspace. This entails clearing your workspace, removing previous R objects, and then setting up your working directory so that at least if you have any set of outputs or input data, at least R will know where to populate the data from. And then another important thing is to load the packages. So for this particular case, we are going to use a set of both non-spatial and spatial data sets. Just to mention a few, Tidyverse by Hadley Wickham, and then the SF package and RGDAL and so on and so forth. Then I've created a function and a loop that basically looks at if a package is not existing in my R environment, then it uploads it. It loads it from CRAN. So basically, my workspace is ready. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to make an attempt of loading the first COVID-19 risk factor, which is exposure. So like I mentioned before, we are using freely available data. So this is data that anyone can access. We don't want to hide anything. So this data throughout this webinar series. So this data has been digitized by the Ministry of Health through their daily press release, media press releases. And also they have situation reports. And this is the link, okay? So in the situation reports, you'll see that they try as much as possible to record how many cases across all the 47 counties. So for this particular case, we are going to use, for those who have the input data, we are going to use the Kenya KE COVID-19 exposure data that basically contains the number cumulatively since March 13th up to date across all the 47 counties in Kenya. What are the cumulative COVID-19 cases? So we are going to use now the RGDAL function to just read in the exposure data. So basically, this is the line of code. And already in my R environment, I've assigned it as an R object called Kenya exposure data. So I'll just want to show you like the first five rows. So here you can see we have in all the 47 counties, we have the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases by detection from the Ministry of Health. Okay, so this is what we are now going to use as our exposure data. Okay, then the second thing is now we are going to do it to delve deeper into looking at what are some of the vulnerability factors that predispose these counties to COVID-19 risk. So vulnerability indicators are usually demographic, socioeconomic indicators that are mainly obtained from the National Bureau of Statistics in any country. So for this particular case, my colleague who had the first webinar series, her name is Shelmith. So she developed a very good R-Shiny application where you could easily access all the tables from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics reports. So you don't have to go and do some scrapping. So already she has done that. She has lessened the burden of you. So for this particular case, the Kenya Red Cross, we really used her R Shiny script, and I would urge you to exploit. And of interest to us for vulnerability, we were looking at the population distribution across the 47 counties, number of street persons, and then as we all know, COVID-19 seems to be attacking more of population above 60. So basically, these are some of the vulnerability indicators that we're going to use for this particular webinar series. So the geocoded vulnerability indicators, I've just loaded them. And as you can see on my R Markdown document, I have population, I have number of households, average household size, number of disabled people, street population, and also demographic categorization of people based on, below 14, 15 to 19, 30 to 59, and above 60. Then lastly, we're now going to look at the adaptive capacity risk, COVID-19 risk factors, okay, at county level. Like I mentioned before, these data sets, we were able to get them from the Kenya Healthcare Federation through this link. And this data contains information on the spatial distribution of hospital beds, isolation beds, ICU isolation beds, ventilators, ICU general beds across all the 47 counties. So now I'm going to load this data from my R environment, and as you can see, these are the variables that I've obtained from the Kenya Health Federation. So we have number of beds, isolation beds, ICU beds, ventilators, and so on and so forth. So just before now delving deep into the COVID-19 inform index, risk index, it will be imperative for us now to do a spatial join, a merging of all these data sets, so that at least we can have a better understanding of how this data is and which of these variables to use in order for us to model COVID-19. So basically, the first thing I noticed about these data sets is some of this vulnerability and lack of adaptive capacity factors were in character format. As you can see here, they are in character. So it's good practice that I convert them to integer, so that at least I can visualize them better on a map. Then the next thing I would do is now to merge them together so that we can have one shapefile or one vector data that has information on COVID-19 exposure, vulnerability, and lack of adaptive capacity. Okay, so this is the function that I used. So here I was trying as much as possible to use the SF package that is greatly used in spatial analysis in R. So the other thing now is now that I have the number of cases, COVID-19 cases across all the 47 counties, together with the population in these counties, I wanted now to derive a variable called COVID-19 county attack rate. So this is derived from dividing the number of COVID-19 cases over the population in that county, then you multiply by a factor of 100,000, so that at least you can know what is the attack rate for COVID-19 within a population of 100,000 people. So this is how the code to just I'm using the mutate variable from dplyr, and I can just even visualize it in my R environment so that at least you can appreciate the attack rate. So here it is. So you can see some counties have a case attack rate of 0 and so on and so forth. So I'm going to talk about the case attack rate later on. So now that we have all the data sets together in one data frame, I'm just going to show you how you can, in a simple way, come up with an interactive map that now visualizes some of the elements of exposure, vulnerability, and lack of adaptive capacity. So for this particular case, I'm going to use the tmap package, which has so many functionalities to come up with interactive maps. So in my previous webinar series, I showed you, I demonstrated to you the importance of choosing one classification method to compare different data sets. So for this particular case, I'm going to divide my data into 3 classes and break it down into quantiles using the tmap. And if I run this code, it takes time because it's now generating an interactive map. So we are going to compare the number of COVID-19 cases with population and isolation, number of isolation beds across all the 47 counties in Kenya. So, and this is the result. Sorry, it's a little bit heavy on my machine, but for those of you who have the HTML, you can clearly hover through. So comparatively, you can now be able to visualize some of the COVID-19 risk index and exposure, which is number of COVID-19 cases, with population, which is now vulnerability, and number of isolation beds, which is lack of adaptive capacity. So for instance, if I just hover on Kitui, we can see at the moment Kitui has 21 cases of COVID-19, and Kitui has a population of about 1.1 million. And the number of isolation beds based on the Kenya Health Federation data is 33. So how can we make meaningful meaning out of this? Which now takes us to the next step, which is modeling, okay? So before any modeling exercise, it is always imperative to basically do some normalization or standardization of your variables, so that at least you can make your data comparable. Okay. So the goal of normalization is to make every data point have the same scale, and also to make every feature equally important. I'm pretty sure most of you have done data normalization using Z-score, but for this particular case, we are going to use minimum, maximum normalization. So depending on the type of normalization that you're going to use, you have to ask yourself, okay, in your set of X variables, so for this case, vulnerability and lack of adaptive capacity, how do they influence your Y, your dependent variable, which is now, COVID-19 risk. So for vulnerability and exposure risk factors, these factors positively associate with COVID-19, meaning the higher the number of COVID-19 cases, the higher the risk. The higher the number of county attack rate, the higher the risk. Same for vulnerability. If we have high number of population of old age people in a county, the higher the risk. Okay. If we have high number of street people in a specific county, the higher the risk. So for this particular case, we are going to use the minimum maximum normalization, where the minimum value, okay, of either vulnerability or exposure gets transformed into 0, while the maximum value gets transformed into 100. So we are normalizing our data into 0 to 100. Okay. The only downside of minimum maximum normalization is that it doesn't handle outliers well. Okay. Then for adaptive risk factors, now we are going to use the reverse of the minimum maximum normalization, because adaptive risk factors, they negatively associate with COVID-19. And let me explain. For instance, a county that has low number of ICU beds is at high risk of COVID-19. Okay, so meaning if a county has zero number of isolation beds, I will give it a value of 100. Whereas if a county has so many number of isolation beds, ventilators, I will give it a score of 0. Okay, so it is like an inverse of the minimum normalization that we will use for vulnerability and exposure. I don't know, at that particular juncture, would it be good for me to invite questions, or should I move on, Jerry?
Yeah, this Nombu here. Yeah, the quick question. So just for everyone to note, when we're doing our modeling, should we always normalize, and is not mean and max the only normalization options out there for refactoring your data before passing it to a data model?
Good question, Nombu. So we have so many standardization methods. Like I mentioned before, we have Z-score. I don't know what's the other one, but we have numerous ways of standardizing your data. So, but for this particular case, we'll just stick with the commonly used minimum maximum normalization.
And so the when you talked about that you did the reverse of min max normalization, is it because that
Yes.
relationship of the what you're trying to correlate the risk factor and COVID is that it's negatively really correlated? So then you reversed the indexing so that it's is it 100 to 0 instead of 0 to 100?
Yes, very correct. So it's dependent on the association of your x variables with your y. For this particular case, our x variables are, our x variable is lack of adaptive capacity. So you want to see how lack of adaptive capacity influences COVID-19 risk. And for this particular case, where we have low numbers of ICU beds, ventilators, and so on and so forth, it means the risk of COVID-19 is high. So it's like an inverse association per se.
Yeah. I don't know, guys, if you have any questions.
I think Colin had a question, but I see Nombu and Shelmith, you had already responded to it. Unless Colin, if you are not satisfied with the answer, you can further explain the question.
I think I'm okay, but I'm having an issue with this. I think it's a dependency KNTR NITR. When I'm trying to run my code here, it tells me that there is no error. The error message is load name. There is no package called KNITR.
Or the NITR package, yeah. So it means that you need to install. You can go to install packages and install the NITR package in your R environment.
I tried even the second webinar. I tried to install it, but it still doesn't work. I don't know why. Why is it my R Studio which is having a problem or what?
Maybe Michael, you can show him installing through tools. There through tools. Near profile.
So
Tools.
you can come tools, install
and
packages,
and then
you can type NITR.
That is actually where I've done it, but maybe I'll try some other time. Let's just continue.
Okay, Collins,
Okay,
I'll reach out to you personally to check your version. Let me reach out to you in the chat.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
or you can send the error image or something, and we can look at it after the session is over. Oh yeah, like a screenshot.
Yeah, send
No
it
problem.
to the chat.
Okay. If there are no further questions, you can continue, Michael.
Okay, so so that's it for normalization. So in order for us now to apply this normalization in my data sets, I created customized R functions so that at least I can apply these functions in my data sets. So like as you can see here in this code, I was able now to come up with the minimum maximum normalization function, which basically subtracts, it takes the value of let's say vulnerability, it subtracts it from the minimum value, then divides it with the maximum minus minimum. Then because I want to make my data sets to be scaled between 0 to 100, then I multiplied by a factor of 100, and then I rounded off the figure to 3 decimal places. Then where the maximum number, so where the minimum number will be given 100 and the maximum number will be given 0. So now that I know I know my COVID-19 exposure and vulnerability index, what I did is I used the mutate each function, and this is the power. This is the power of dplyr, and the good thing with the SF package, it synthesizes spatial analysis with data with non-spatial analytics. So you can use packages that are for non-spatial, and you can synthesize them together in one environment, which is now what we call tidyr. So I've used the mutate each function, so which basically will apply the customized normalization across all my vulnerability and my exposure, my exposure indicators. So just allow me to run this chunks of code. There you are. And then I'm going now to convert it into a data frame so that now I can just show you how my values have been normalized. Okay. So let me for instance arranged in ascending order the number of COVID-19 cases. So we know that Nairobi has the most number of COVID-19 cases, cumulative cases. So right now, Nairobi has been given a score of 100, okay? Also, Nairobi leads in when it comes to attack rate. So in every 1,000 people, the attack rate for Nairobi is the highest across all the 47 counties. And as a result, it has been given a number of the highest score, which is 100. So same for population, same for number of households. But when it comes to average household size, Mandera has the highest score. When it comes to number of disabled people, Meru, okay, and so on and so forth. So this is the essence of normalization. At least it makes the data comparable, and also it assigns some sense of equal weight to your variables. Okay, so that's it for normalization of vulnerability and exposure risk factors. So I'm going also to do the same. I'm also going to do the same for the adaptive risk factors, which is now number of ventilators, ICU beds, and so on and so forth. And yeah, let's see the results. And maybe this is where maybe it will spark some debate. So when it comes to number of beds, okay, Nairobi has been given a score of 0, okay, because it essentially we know that Nairobi has the most number of beds, so it means it has a very low risk based on this fact. But let's look at a county like Lamu. So across all the 47 counties, when it comes to distribution of number of beds, Lamu seems to be at higher risk of COVID-19. Let's look at number of ventilators. Okay, so when it comes to number of ventilators, according to the data from the Kenya Health Federation, okay, I don't want you guys to crucify me. This is open data from the Kenya Health Federation. It shows that a majority of counties have been given the weight of 100, okay, meaning that they are at very high risk of COVID-19 by virtue of them either having low numbers of ventilators or few or no ventilators at all. Okay, and Nairobi, okay, Nairobi and Meru are the only counties that have been given a very low score based on the number of ventilators. So I just wanted you to now appreciate why we used the minimum maximum and the reverse of minimum maximum. Okay, then so are there any questions from there, or let me just first of all allow me to visualize the normalized COVID-19 risk factors, so that at least you could have some sense of okay, I think I need to run this chunk of code. So like I said before, the T map, just knitting an interactive map in my R Markdown. It takes time because the shape files are very heavy. So in my previous section, I had shown you how to to visualize variables that were not standardized. And now here you can see now I've standardized all my variables. And I will give an example for the same example for Kitui County. Okay. So here we don't have the exact values for cases. So here we've now normalized it between 0 and 100. When it comes to adaptive capacity isolation beds, Kitui has been given a score of 94%. Population-wise, 23%, and in terms of the number of COVID-19 cases, it has been given a score of 0.2, and this is comparatively with the other 47 counties. Okay, so now we are going to delve into the juiciest part of any modeling section, which is now assigning weights. Okay. After normalizing data, it is now up to you to come up with weights that you can assign to your standardized variables. Okay. So I'm going to give a walkthrough of how the inform index does the weighting on vulnerability. So one, you should note that not all vulnerability indicators are relevant for weighting. Okay, you only have to pick a few. Okay, so the choice of you now picking the most relevant vulnerability, exposure, or lack of adaptive capacity risk factors is dependent on either expert opinion. So you can have you can interview key informant interviews who are closely linked within that subject field. So it could be medical doctors, it could be epidemiologists, it could be academia, researchers, who now will be able to guide you, okay, when it comes to vulnerability, okay, which of the vulnerability factors are closely associated with COVID-19, okay? So for this particular case, I'm just doing a demo, okay? So for me, from the media, from media sources, we kept on hearing that, okay, people above 60 are at high risk. And then again, I also thought, okay, disabled population are also at high risk of COVID-19. At the same time, the street population, people who don't have dwellings, okay, they're also at high risk, okay. And then again, if a specific county has highest number of population, they're at high risk, okay. So the gist behind weighting using the informed framework is you give equal weights that add up to 1, okay. So once you've normalized your data sets, you assign equal weights that all add up to 1. So for this particular case, I assigned a weight of 0.3 in population above 60, disabled population, street population, and then for population, I gave a weight of 0.1, okay? But also, this is subjective. You could also get expert opinion from epidemiologists, medical practitioners, or any or people from that research field, so that at least through either key informant interviews or focus group discussions, so that at least you can have a good weighting of vulnerability, lack of adaptive and exposure index for the using the informed framework. Okay, so I'm just using these weights for demonstrative purposes, but just bear in mind, if we were now to have this at a very national scale, we would now go into that level, okay, of getting expert opinion with regard to these weightings. So in my normalized vulnerability index, as you can see, I've applied the equal weights that sum up to 1.0, okay? And I can run this chunk of code and say run line. And then let me convert it to data frame so that at least we can have some visualization and just appreciate the weights that I have given to my data, the vulnerability. So, okay. So based on my weightings, and this is very subjective, Nairobi leads, Nairobi County is the most vulnerable county in terms of COVID-19. Taking into account it has the highest population. Secondly, it also has a good number of disabled people. Thirdly, it has the highest number of street population. And fourthly, it also has a good number of people above the age of 60. Okay. And this is followed by Meru, and the least vulnerable, okay, the least vulnerable county based on the COVID-19 inform index is Lamu. One, because it has the least number of population, the least number of disabled people, and the least number of people who are above the age of 60. So at this particular juncture, I would want us to have a conversation about the results, the outcomes that we are having when it comes to vulnerability. So Njeri, maybe for those who have questions, we can have a discussion maybe.
Yeah, are there any questions around this? I'm not really seeing any questions. Anyone who has anything interesting or insights that they have seen from the vulnerability scores of different counties or from the factors that are used in the vulnerability index, you can raise them up now, we can chat.
Silence means they have understood, I guess.
I think so.
So the essence of, okay.
I think we have something from someone.
Thank you very much. I'm just curious about the weights that you are using. I see population used. Okay, I know it is not standard, as you mentioned. It might vary based on the location. But is there a given criteria that is used? Say why you are using 0.1 for the population and then 0.3 for the rest? Can it be interchanged?
Thanks, Brian, for that good question. You are correct. This can be interchanged. And like I had mentioned before, before delving into the weighting, I mentioned that my weights, I've given a caveat. This is based on my own personal opinion, but it would be good to involve expert opinion into the weighting process, okay? So it would be good to draw key informants within the field of epidemiology, within the field of health analytics, so that at least they can better inform on the weighting. Alternatively, the inform index also advocates for equal weighting. Okay, so you can do an equal weighting. I don't know. We can do it on the fly. So we have how many indicators? 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you were to do 0.25, 0.25, let's just see what the outcome will have. Okay. So if you don't want to be very subjective in your weighting, the informed framework also allows you to do equal weighting. So let's see the results that you're going to obtain. So I've done an equal weighting of 0.25 for all the 4 variables, so it's adding up to 1. And let's see the results. Okay, so still Nairobi leads in terms of vulnerability, and Lamu still it's at the tail end. It's the least vulnerable. It's the least vulnerable county. Yeah. So you can use equal weights, and you can give a justification to it as well. Any other question? So maybe I will go into exposure. Okay. So for exposure, we had the cumulative number of COVID-19 cases across all the 47 counties, and the COVID-19 attack rate, basically the number of cases within 100,000 people in a specified county. So for COVID-19, for the exposure, I applied equal weights, okay, because anyway, it was subjective, and I didn't want to, yeah, it was based on my own personal opinion. And let's see the results and see which county is it's the most exposed to 19 based on exposure and attack rate. So yes, Nairobi leads, followed by Mombasa, then by Busia. So you can clearly see that Nairobi has the highest number of COVID-19 cases, cumulative cases, and also it has the highest attack rate. So when we combine the two, it means that it is the most, it will be given the highest weight, okay? Followed by Mombasa, Busia, Kajiado, Kiambu, and so on and so forth, okay? So maybe we can, and then the least exposed, I don't know who can take a guess. Who can take a guess which are the least exposed counties to COVID-19?
Maybe in the northern side. Turkana.
Let me give you a hint. How many counties have recorded COVID-19 cases so far in Kenya?
Oh,
for those who follow the news. Okay, Shelmit can attempt.
Maybe Shelmit, you have an answer.
The last time I checked, it was 44, but I've not watched news in a while.
Yeah, Shelmit, you're right. It's 44. So out of the 47, which counties will have the least exposure to COVID-19? Will it be the 44 or the other? Okay, I think I've given too much hint. Drum rolls. The correct answer would be the 3 counties that haven't yet recorded any COVID-19 case. Okay, so this will be the least exposed counties. And these are, so far we don't have any case, recorded case in Professor Lonyangapuo's county. Neither do we have any COVID-19 case in Samburu. Also, we don't have any COVID-19 case in Baringo. So by virtue of this, this would be the least exposed. They'll be given the least exposure weight of 0. Okay. So I'll now go to the most controversial aspect of COVID-19 risk, which is adaptive capacity. Okay, as we all know, our president has been advocating for COVID-19 preparedness at county level, basically advocating for the county governments to have a minimum of 300 COVID-19 isolation beds. And this will pave way for many other things. So for this particular case, yes, we use data from the Kenya Health Federation. Okay, so openly data. So in terms of waiting, now I was also stuck in between assigning more weight to ventilators, ICU beds general, or even isolation beds. But then again, I just settled in assigning equal weights. Okay, so for this particular case, I looked at isolation beds, isolation ICU beds, and then number of ventilators, and then ICU beds, but ICU beds in the general ward. Okay, so I assigned an equal weight, adding to 1, and the results will be a little bit interesting. So let's see which county is at high risk because of low number of preparedness, for lack of a better word. Okay, so when it comes to adaptive capacity, okay, Baringo is number 1. Okay, adaptive capacity. Okay, because according to our data, it either has the fewest number of isolation beds, ICU beds, ventilators. But then again, remember, in our exposure section, we saw that it is the least exposed. Okay, so it has no COVID-19 cases, but then again, okay, it is at high risk of COVID-19 because of the level of adaptive capacity. Okay, so this is okay, let's not use these figures as the real truth, because this data from the Kenya Health Federation might be updated. Okay, so we also need to take into account that so many counties have initiated so many programs in ensuring that they have ventilators, they have ICU beds, they have isolation beds, and so on and so forth. So for lack of adaptive capacity, take note that this is only for demonstration purposes. Okay, so we'll need to get more updated data from the counties themselves to see how the level of preparedness they are at the moment. Okay, so and the county that is well prepared for COVID-19, we have Nairobi, since it has the highest number of isolation beds, it has the highest number of ventilators, and so on and so forth. Okay, so any questions as of now, or should I proceed on with the webinar series? Jerry?
Are there any on the chat so far? I don't see questions. I just see yeah, there are no questions, but off the shelf, anyone can throw in a few questions with regarding to the indicators for any of what you've discussed. So the adaptive weighted values, the exposure weighted. If anyone has questions. Why use, okay, so we have a question from, okay, the name is a bit hard to pronounce, Oluwas Tosin.
Hello, can you
Yeah,
can you hear
great.
me?
You can ask the question. Yeah, we can.
All right, no, it's fine. I'm Tosin. I'm a Nigerian, and that's why my name is difficult to pronounce. Just
Welcome.
thanks for the model. It's really interesting. I'm a student, of course, of some of these things you're doing. So that's why I'm asking the question, why the choice of using adaptive capacity instead of coping capacity? I mean, in your model, I mean, probably not in the technical aspects. And probably there's a bit of the terminologies differences. Just wanted to know your opinion. Yeah. Did you get my question?
Yeah, yes. I've gotten your question. Thank you so much for your question. So why adaptive capacity? So adaptive capacity tries to look at the level of the level of preparedness to COVID-19 across all the counties. So it's good to look at adaptive capacity as an element of COVID-19 risk, in the sense that counties that have well prepared for COVID-19 in terms of strengthening their health capacity will be deemed to be at lower risk, as opposed to counties that don't have any health capacity at county level. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier on, at the beginning of this webinar series, the Inform COVID-19 Risk Index also looks at lack of adaptive capacity as a risk factor to COVID-19. Okay, so it looks at both institutional, it looks at the technical, the preparedness level of any county or country to prepare for or to respond to COVID-19. I don't know if I've been able to answer you.
Maybe
Over to you.
Thanks.
You can
Thanks. I understand.
Oh, okay. Because I wanted to understand what Tosin you meant by coping. Like if it's not adaptive but coping capacity, like what would be the difference?
Oh,
Yeah, I think that's
okay. I think the same are one of the they are synonymous. So it can
okay.
either be coping capacity, coping mechanisms, or adaptive capacity. Yeah, and it's good that Tosin, you're here from Nigeria. And one thing I would want to acknowledge is this framework can be used in all countries across the globe, as long as you have the data on exposure, vulnerability, and adaptive capacity or coping mechanism. Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think you can continue. So far, I don't see any other questions.
Okay, so the last thing now would be to merge the exposure, vulnerability, and adaptive capacity, and basically to merge the three in one vector layer. And I'll just want to open this so that at least you can appreciate and then also to derive the COVID-19 risk. Okay, so the COVID-19 risk is a function of now adding vulnerability, exposure, and adaptive capacity, and doing an average based on the three. Okay, and the results are as shown here. So drum rolls, So while taking into account vulnerability, exposure, and adaptive capacity or coping mechanisms, from our analysis using the Inform COVID-19 Risk Index, we can see that Nairobi County has the highest COVID-19 risk, okay? And this is followed by Mombasa County, okay? And then Kiambu, Meru, and the list. So if somebody would ask you which is the safest county to go and relax now that we don't have any movement restrictions, Mandera. Okay, so while looking at vulnerability, exposure, and adaptive capacity, it has the least score. So basically now we've been able now to model COVID-19 risk using the Inform COVID-19 index. Okay, and here we can clearly see that Nairobi is the highest. Okay, and the value of us now doing this is to enhance decision making, especially within humanitarian organizations. So how best can humanitarian organizations such as the Kenya Red Cross enhance their response? Okay, how can they increase awareness? How can they sensitize communities? Okay, how can they allocate awareness programs in these counties? So based on the COVID-19 risk index, humanitarian organizations can now be able to allocate resources in counties that are at high risk of COVID-19, and so on and so forth. Then also for advocacy, it will be good that counties with the counties with low adaptive capacity risk score, just for them to have their own audit of where they are in terms of the number of ICU beds, ventilators, and they'll be able now to see, hey, we need to up our game in terms of COVID-19 preparedness. I don't know if we have any questions for now, but I would want now to visualize the three vulnerability, exposure, and adaptive capacity using the using an interactive map, using the interactive map, using the TMap package. So it's gonna take time. So I don't know if we have questions before it displays on my R Markdown. Do you have any questions with regard to the COVID-19 risk score that we have? Is it contentious? Do people feel that it's not really speaking well to what is on the ground? It doesn't reflect well on the true reality on the ground. Yeah, we could have such discussions so that at least we could see how best we could improve on our weighting. But basically, yeah, as you can see from the map, the counties in red are the ones in at high risk. And something that is worth noting is counties, there is some element of spatial autocorrelation, okay? Counties that are more close to Nairobi or counties that are more close to urbanized centers, such as Mombasa, Nairobi, and Kisumu, seem to be at high COVID-19 risk, okay? And counties that tend to be far away from these urbanized centers seem to be having low COVID-19 risk. So maybe it would be good for somebody to look at the element of, spatial autocorrelation and see if yes, there is some element of spatial dependence of COVID-19 risk. So this can pave way to more research. And same for vulnerability. And then when it comes to adaptive capacity, yeah, sorry, I would want to show adaptive capacity there. When it comes to adaptive capacity, again, the inverse is true, okay? We seem to be having counties that are far away from towns, especially the northern eastern counties of Kenya, having low adaptive capacity. These are the ones highlighted in red. Okay, so it shows that these counties in the north, it would be good that they review their preparedness for COVID-19. Then for exposure, again, we can see a similar trend. Counties that are closer to Nairobi seem to be having more, even though we have a few counties such as Isiolo and Garissa, which are nowhere near any major cities, have the same exposure risk factor as counties that are near Nairobi. Yeah. So maybe this is an interactive way of now comparing COVID-19 risk from vulnerability, exposure, and adaptive capacity. So maybe I would give time for discussions based on the results we have from members in this webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think this would be a really good time to reflect on the results. Like, for example, when you have this map of is it exposure, where we have like Garissa having a really high exposure, we have to now start asking questions like, what is the indicator mainly pointing towards such a situation? What were the indicators for exposure, and why is it that area is like so high,
okay,
among other things?
So so we are at Garissa. So the main indicator for exposure was cumulative number of COVID-19 cases, and also the COVID-19 attack rate. So what is the attack rate, COVID-19 attack rate in 100,000 of the population in Garissa County? So while taking into account these two factors, Garissa has a COVID-19 risk score of 36%. No, it has an exposure factor of 1.4%, which is a little bit low, but comparatively, it's significant.
Maybe we can have questions, discussions, comments. You can unmute yourself.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes,
So my question is two on your model. First is to know if every of your variables, that is the exposure, adaptive capacity, were normalized. If you normalize everything, one.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Then, so your normalization, what method did you use? That was and I realized when you calculated your risk, you used vulnerability plus exposure plus adaptive capacity, I think the 3, and then you divided it by 3 or 2. So I just want to know why so, because I want to know if I know sometimes some use multiplication, that is probably yeah. So why use them plus, and would that make a difference? Just those two questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Tosin, for those set of questions. So I would want to begin with the first question. If we normalized, yes, we did normalized. We normalized. So for every risk factor, whether it was vulnerability, whether it was exposure or adaptive capacity, we normalized the risk factors for vulnerability based on minimum maximum normalization for those factors that positively influence COVID-19 risk. Then we use the reverse of the minimum maximum for lack of adaptive for lack of coping mechanism factors where we have high values of let's say ventilators are given 0, like the inverse of minimum maximum normalization. Then for weighting, okay, so we were able now to give equal weights, okay, for each of the COVID-19 risk factors within exposure, within adaptive capacity, and within vulnerability. And what we did was we assigned equal weights that add up to 1. Okay, so it was like a multiplication factor. Okay, so you 0 point something multiplied by that normalized risk indicator plus like that. Maybe I can show you. I can just yeah, like for instance, for the exposure factor, we said we applied equal weights to cumulative cases and the attack rate, and the function was so we assigned 0.5 0.5 to the two risk factors, and the weighting adds up to 1, and then we summed them up as 1. Okay, then now in order for us to generate the overall COVID-19 risk score, what we did was maybe I can open here. We added vulnerability, exposure, adaptive capacity, then we divided by 3 because we have three dimensions of COVID-19 risk, and now which gave us the overall COVID-19 risk score. And this is based on the index for risk management framework by the Joint Research Center. Yeah, I don't know if I've been able to answer some of your pertinent questions, Tosin.
Yes, I think you agree you did. I just wanted to know if you actually inversed it as well, which you yes, explained you did. It was just interesting, of course, to see yeah, different methods in achieving about the same thing. So thank you so much.
Okay, and there's in my either Add notebook or the knitted HTML, I've provided some learning resources where you can learn more about the index for risk management framework for COVID-19, which you can now learn more about the approach that I used. Yeah. Thanks, Tosin.
Yeah, any other questions? I see a comment from Andy, really appreciating the work that we are using open source index and doing it transparently. So kudos to Red Cross for that. And the work is really informative as well and reusable. So we are also grateful for sharing the code. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, maybe just to add on that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, the Inform Index is open source. It's globally accepted, so anybody can use it. So even the data sets that are used in the Inform Index, okay, they are openly available, okay, but they are credible. It's something that you could, credibly use for analysis. Yeah. Any question?
Just an additional question. Sorry. Okay. No, go ahead.
Oh, can I go ahead, Tosin?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, Michael. I think I am getting it. I enjoy the presentation very much, and also thank you to Tosin. He's my teacher, so that's why he's good. But mine is easy. I think for the exposure element, you're considering the exposure element is the population.
No.
Yeah.
So for exposure, we looked at two risk factors. One, cumulative COVID-19 cumulative cases across all the 47 counties. And we also looked at the COVID-19 attack rate, which is derived by calculating cumulative COVID-19 cases divided by the total population in that county, then multiplying it by a number of 100,000 people. So just try, yeah.
Oh, okay, I get it. Okay, but I was wondering, were you maybe like I don't know, going to consider like they say that the risk group among the population, like the age group of around, I don't know, they say around 45 to around 60. So I was thinking, because maybe I know it can be factored in the exposure in terms of the attack rate, maybe.
I totally agree with you. So the demographic factors, risk factors such as age, gender, are always embedded under vulnerability.
Yeah.
So for this particular case, we managed to use, we only looked at age distribution of people above the age of 65. But I also agree with you, maybe in our consequent analysis, we should also include the active age, which is 30 to 59. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, yeah, it should be considered in the vulnerability. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes. So demographic factors, awareness factors, behavioral, okay, such as movement of population from one county to the next. These are factors that make people more vulnerable, okay, more vulnerable to COVID-19. So they should be under vulnerability.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And maybe next time, just for the vulnerability factors, you can also indicate like the indicators that you just you can mention them so that we can be able to just tell the indicators that you considered. But thank you for the presentation. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John. Maybe just a quick one. I will. We considered for vulnerability. We considered population above the age of 60. We also considered disabled population, and then we considered street population, and then we considered population, the general population in a county. So those are the five vulnerability factors that we used for this particular model. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Any other question or?
Michael, maybe just also a question on the
Sorry, Ario,
we have lost
we
you
seem
for
to have lost you.
maybe you can type your question in the chat.
Yeah, I
A
think
question.
okay.
Michael, would it also be probably useful for the exposure index to consider border towns, counties that border other countries, to just consider factors like truck drivers and how that exposes counties to probably factors like trading and counties that are neighboring that? Would that be something that would be useful for the exposure index, for the exposure factors, I mean?
For sure. I totally agree with you, Yario. We can throw in the exposure element of proximity to border towns, but not just border towns, but border countries, but rather border countries that have high COVID-19 cases. Yeah, this is something that we could also consider in our model. And I'm pretty sure we'll have very good, interesting findings from that. So what I'm saying is it's not cast on stone that you'll have a limitation of the number of exposure elements, risk factors. You can throw in as many as possible as long as they are very relevant to your model. Yeah.
So, Michael, I just wanted to thank you as well for the presentation, which was really interesting and really great. And yeah, as I said in the comment, it's great to see that this is sort of open and transparent, because I've seen some other things published which are a bit more like a black box kind of thing that produces an output for vulnerability, but it's difficult to sort of modify it. So that, the great thing about this seems to be that you can use it to start discussion, and you can kind of change things, and it's really cool.
Thanks, Andy South, for that. I really appreciate your comment and feedback. For sure. The good thing about the Inform Index, there's that level of transparency. It enables all the users to just dissect the various data sets and COVID-19 risk that were fed into the model. And it allows you also to give some, adjustments of the weighting criteria, either based on further discussions with stakeholders who are mainly familiar with this area, this field of health informatics or epidemiology. Yeah, so I totally agree with you. The level of transparency with COVID-19 risk index, the Inform Index, is one huge advantage of this framework. Thank you so much for that.
And I just wanted to make a little plug for, we have a project called AfriMapR, where we're starting to make sort of components to make it easier to make sort of data-driven maps of Africa. So if you have a look at the afrimapr.org website, I'll send you an email as well. But as well, if anyone else wants to look at that, I'll I'll type it into the chat box. And if anyone has kind of queries about things that they would like to be easier, kind of stumbling blocks that they have in this area, then we're looking to make those easier. So things like we've been working on making administrative boundaries sort of more easily available in R, and we've been looking at health facilities as well. So I'll put that in the box, and anyone's welcome to get in touch with us.
Thanks, Andy, for that. I had even put your website as part of the learning resources, but yeah, it's okay. You can put it in the chat box, and it's very encouraging to see that the consortiums of our users, both here in Kenya and in worldwide in Africa, these consortiums consortiums are growing bigger by the day, and I would want to embrace the R spatialites in this forum to join as many forums as learning forums in R as much as possible, in order for them to grow their technical skills in modeling spatial data and spatial data, come up with business intelligence tools such as R Shiny and so on and so forth. So yeah, quite encouraging from Andy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andy. That's you can maybe post the website on the chat box. Should be great for all the other users. Awesome, AfriMap Art. It's really good work you're doing there, and also not just joining learning forums, but as well as get involved in projects like what you guys in Kenya Red Cross Michael are doing, and others out there. I think at the end of the session we will share contact information where we can reach out to each other. We can explore further ways to use R, further ways to use other technologies for such kind of projects for social good. So are there any other questions? I see something from Salim. Would be good. Salim, maybe you can unmute yourself and comment.
Sure. I just posted a comment here that I think, first of all, thanks so much, Michael and the team, for putting this all together. It's really fantastic. But I was just wondering if it was possible to try to look at especially exposure at a sub-county level, to try to be able to identify whether or not the spread, like how closely it is correlated with major transportation corridors. I mean, we talk about like cross-border trade, but also just now that everything has been opened up in the country, like it would be good to see potentially in future just how this is affecting the spread of the disease, especially through the major transportation corridors. So that was just my comment.
Thanks, Salim, for that. Yeah, for sure. Something that we haven't really looked at, and I think it's very important to add on to incorporate into the risk framework, is population movement. Now that there's some easing up of movement restrictions, but we tried as much as possible to get this data, but it's a little bit difficult to get it from open source, from openly available sources. So I don't know, for those of you who are on this forum, maybe you could also suggest of a better way of getting population movement, just to see how the frequency of people moving from one town to the next. So that at least we can add it as an exposure element. The other important thing also is on vulnerability. There's also an element tied to behavioral traits. So there is awareness level. So how much aware are people on COVID-19 set guidelines? You would be surprised to go to counties where people don't have masks on, people don't wash their hands. And then if you intertwine it with traditional beliefs, you'll be surprised that people don't, even as of now, there are people who don't think that COVID-19 is existent. So this can pave way to more research and see how best we can collect data on behavioral or population movement. And this is something that has been advocated for by the Inform Index whenever we are looking at COVID-19 vulnerability. So because of limitations in those data points, for this particular case, we only focused on demographic indicators as for for vulnerability. Yeah, but thanks for that, Salim. I don't know. Maybe I would want to. Okay, over to you.
No, I just wanted to ask if there are no further questions. Like maybe you can wind up.
Yeah. So thank you all for the session. I'm looking forward to further engagements with you, especially if you feel that we can get more data sets on exposure, vulnerability, and lack of adaptive capacity. If you have those data sets, you can share the links on the chat box. So for the next webinar series, which will be the final one in a fortnight, I'll try as much as possible now to delve deep into how best we can use interactive maps to basically visualize, to visualize COVID-19 risk factors, as well as the vulnerability, lack of adaptive capacity, and exposure. But I thank you all for your time and your commitment in this webinar series. Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for everything. We are really grateful for having you do this and dedicate your time to helping scaling up our community and even beyond our community, because you see we have guest participants from all over the world, which is really encouraging. If I think if you're over, you can allow me to share my screen.
Yes, for sure, most certainly.
So, Michael, yes, again, I would like to thank you very much for joining the Women in GIS Kenya team to help us um, do our due diligence to help the community build their skills, learn more from the skills that are already within the community. And just as I mentioned, the After Office Hours series are something that we conduct every fortnight and it is in various technologies, various programming languages, various software that is important or is trending right now, so that it can be able to people can be able to use it for the future, for future use. Now, I would like to just briefly mention as we close up, Women in GIS Kenya is a team consists of a team of young advocates from various industry sectors, and we mainly encourage or advance the presence of women in GIS. But our main agenda is also to address women issues, to address gender issues. So we also encourage men as well to join in our work, but addressing the issues that affect women. And we also, beyond that, we foster relationships and we share resources with various industry, various institutions. So if you're interested in being part of our group or joining us in different ways, you can suggest to us interesting things that we can conduct. And then we also have various activities. So we usually have networking events. We have knowledge transfer sessions such as this kind of technical webinars or other kind of knowledge transfer sessions. And we also do mentorship and research in project delivery. So right now, we have been conducting a series of R training. We have one more left, so stay tuned for the spatial data analysis, the fourth series, where we will be discussing mainly publishing and dissemination of your work. So I hope you will join in, because it will be pretty interesting to see all the outputs that we have seen today and the interactive maps that Michael has presented today actually published in a way that you can share your information, you can share your work with the public, you can share it with other people. So this would be like closing up the knowledge of what you've gained so far in a way that you can now present it to people. So I'm pretty sure it would be helpful, and I hope that you will all join in. This will be on the 6th of August, so 2 weeks from now. Currently, we're also still running what we call the Data Visualization Challenge. So as Women in GIS, we also do run challenges where we get data around a prevalent issue in society, and then we encourage the community to create visualizations that can help inform people around what is happening with that particular situation, and also be able to communicate this information to stakeholders. Therefore, they can use it in various ways to inform their policy making, to help them make decisions. So in a way, you do become part of the voice, you do create a change with your work. So I'd encourage anyone who's interested in joining to email us directly, and we will send you the data. You're allowed to use any software, any tool, any language you wish to create a final visualization product. It's been running since the 29th of June. We are accepting visualizations until the 29th of July. So please do send in some interest. And so, yeah, I'd like to, before I close off, to just give a shout out to the team that's been behind all this work. So we have Yariwo as our strategy lead, Caroline as our operations lead, myself as the technical lead. We have Numbiselo as a research lead, and then we have great associates. We have Angela, Amos, and Ruth, and our strategic advisor, Sam. So shout out to the team who's been running this, as well as now our partners such as Kenya Red Cross. So shout out to Michael for your great work. And yeah, how you can contribute is you can either spread or share the word of what we do, share the webinar links, share the materials, share the insights you get. You can join and become a member through our website. Just go to our website, wigisque.co.ke, and you click on join, and then you fill in the form. You can host an event, so you can reach out to us by mail and discuss any ideas that you may have to host an event with us that aligns with our mission, and we can definitely partner and work together. And finally, you can also join our team by becoming a volunteer, by also partnering with us to train the community, among other things. So yeah, with that, this is our contact details. If you have any further information, you have any questions, you want to reach out to us, you can email us at these two emails or call us. And also, I think, Michael, you can share contact information for Red Cross on the chat, where if anyone has further questions around the projects that Kenya Red Cross and ICHA is doing, then they can reach out to you, because you've been doing really interesting, amazing work with COVID-19, and we are really grateful for the work we are seeing. And like Andy said, it's great to see that there's something out there that is open source, reusable, modifiable, among others, that we can, as a community, use or start working on without having to pay. So that's a good thing. And yeah, so with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for attending, and yeah, close the session. Michael, if you have anything else, yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to say.
No, I've already shared my closing remarks. My email, both Kenya Red Cross and personal email, are on the chat box. Yeah, so thank you all, and stay safe.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for such a wonderful session. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all.